Take a look at Europe from space. You can actually see Europe's climate is changing. Look how France's landscape turned from being lush and green to dry and brown in just 9 days during a recent heatwave. Rivers show it too. Look how much narrower the Rhine in Germany got in just 1 year. The changes reach all the way to the Alps, where glaciers are disappearing.
One of the things that's quite striking to me as a climate scientist is how quickly Europe is warming compared to our projections. These changes are happening faster than we expected them to. So there have been papers where people have looked at what might the world look like in 2050, and they made the kind of forecasts of temperatures that we're actually starting to reach already in 2026. And that's quite scary.
And it's not just about higher temperatures. What happens when Europe gets hotter is having knock-on effects across the continent. Higher temperatures pull more moisture from soils and vegetation. Land dries out, and rivers and reservoirs lose water, like here in Poland.
Jak żyję 70, a tak jeszcze nie widziałem takiego poziomu wody. A dzisiaj w krótkich spodenkach można przejść, a wtedy gardła łapała woda.
And when extreme heat, lower water levels, drought and dry vegetation combine, landscapes burn much easier. So the droughts, heat waves and wildfires we're seeing aren't simply separate crises. A hotter climate is changing the conditions behind all of them. A recent World Weather Attribution analysis found that human-caused warming has made the conditions fueling major wildfires far more likely across parts of Europe.
And temperatures in Europe are rising actually more quickly than most other places on the planet. That means that we've had these drought conditions that we've seen across Europe, and that also means that we've got these really fire-prone conditions as well.
And in Europe's current summer, those conditions have accelerated massive wildfires across the continent.
We have a lot of firefighting capacity in Europe, but we're not used to having to deal with these simultaneous outbreaks of large wildfires. And the risk is that as the world continues to warm, we're going to see the risk of these wildfires increase everywhere. And that means that the risk of multiple large fires simultaneously increases much more. And that really could become a problem for our ability to contain those fires if they start to happen simultaneously.
The effects of that can already be felt by people on the ground.
Είναι λες και μου έχεις ξεριζώσει την καρδιά. Γιατί ήταν ένα πανέμορφο μέρος, εδώ περνούσαμε τα καλοκαίρια μας. Έχουμε ζήσει πολύ ευχάριστες στιγμές και δεν υπάρχει τίποτα πια.
Europe's changing climate isn't something we can just see in forests, rivers and satellite images. We can also feel it in our homes and cities too, which are becoming dangerously hot.
Ja, ich sag mal, dieses Jahr ist extrem. Die lang anhaltende Hitze, nicht mal kurz mal 40 Grad oder so. Ne? Jetzt haben wir schon seit, ich glaube, 7, 8 Wochen diese Hitze. Ja. Ja, macht Angst.
This summer has been particularly unusual in terms of how many heat waves we've had. The effect that climate change is having on all of those heat waves is just to make them a few degrees hotter. And we know that Europe is the continent that is warming fastest anywhere in the world. So the hottest temperatures in Europe are now 3 or 4 degrees higher than they would have been in a world without fossil fuel emissions causing that global warming.
A few degrees might not sound like much, but in a heat wave, it can make a huge difference, especially on a continent that isn't prepared for this kind of temperature increase.
Our housing and our public buildings and our offices are really not designed to cope with those very high temperatures. Especially in Northern Europe, we're set up to retain heat rather than to keep heat out. Those 3 to 4 extra degrees, they're pushing these temperatures from these really unusual, really extreme heat waves from uncomfortably hot to dangerously hot.
It's not just vulnerable people, like the elderly, or people with pre-existing medical conditions who are at risk.
The temperatures that we're seeing now in Europe are dangerous even if you don't have those underlying conditions. And we've heard some really grim stories of deaths directly from the heat, of children in cars, of people being found in apartments without air conditioning or outdoor workers.
More than 10,000 excess deaths were recorded across Europe during just one heat wave in late June. So Europe faces 2 challenges at once: dealing with this new hotter climate and trying to prevent it from getting much worse.
The WMO actually recommended last year that governments across Europe need to start preparing for summer heat in the same way that they currently prepare for the winter flu season. And I think that's a mental adjustment that we need to make in Europe, especially in Northern Europe, that summer is no longer about having a lovely time here, having an ice cream on the beach or a pint in the park. It's really, these temperatures are going to be dangerous, and we need to think about how we can prepare for that.
For example, by cooling cities and buildings, protecting vulnerable people during heat waves, managing forest and water differently, and detecting risks earlier. The UK's mapping agency, for instance, uses location data to identify homes and infrastructure at risk from wildfires, floods, coastal erosion and extreme heat.
We've invested in drone technology, so we have drones that do flybys of certain areas where we need that extra granularity.
The important thing to remember is that what things look like in a few decades is completely within our control collectively. It depends completely on how quickly the world is warming, which depends on how many greenhouse gases we're putting into the atmosphere, and that is primarily driven by our fossil fuel emissions. So if we can get those under control and head towards net zero, we can stop increasing the rate of warming and we can do something about this.